The mysterious distress call. Jack Carter sat alone in the cockpit of his old spaceship, the starbound rover. The control panel flickered with dim, green lights, showing nothing but empty space ahead. He had been flying through the dark sector for weeks now, collecting metal scraps from abandoned space stations. It was a lonely job, but Jack didn't mind. Space had been his home for years, ever since he left Earth. Just as he was about to take another sip of his cold coffee, a sudden beeping sound filled the cockpit. Unknown distress signal detected, the ship's AI announced in its flat voice. Jack frowned. A distress call. In this dead part of space. That was strange. Nobody came to this sector anymore. It was filled with destroyed planets, silent moons, and old battle wrecks, a place long forgotten after the Great War between the alien empires. Jack tapped a few buttons, activating the communicator. The signal was weak, old, and barely understandable. But one thing was clear. It was a call for help. "Please, help me," a faint voice whispered through the static. Jack sat up straight. The voice sounded desperate, weak, and scared. He checked the coordinates. It was coming from a small, lifeless planet just a few thousand miles away. His fingers hovered over the controls. He knew the smart choice was to ignore it. A distress call in a place like this. It could be a trap. Space pirates sometimes used fake signals to lure ships in. And yet, something felt different. The voice sounded too real, too desperate. Jack sighed. "I must be crazy," he muttered. He turned the ship toward the planet, landing on the dead planet. As the starbound rover entered the planet's atmosphere, Jack saw nothing but endless sand dunes and rocky hills. The place was completely dead. No signs of life, no water, no vegetation. Just an old, ruined battlefield from a war long forgotten. His ship's scanner beeped. The signal was coming from a crashed escape pod near a small canyon. Jack carefully landed the ship a few meters away. The engines hissed as he powered them down. He grabbed his plasma pistol and stepped out. The air was thin, dry, and filled with the scent of burnt metal. His boots crunched against the sand as he walked toward the escape pod. The pod was old and damaged. Its metal surface was burned, and parts of it were covered in dust. Jack pulled out his scanner. There was one life sign inside, but it was weak. He gripped the pod's emergency latch and pulled. With a loud hiss, the door slowly opened. Inside, lying on the cold metal floor, was a woman. The mysterious alien woman. Jack's breath caught in his throat. She wasn't human. Her skin was a shimmering silver color, glowing faintly under the dim light. Her hair was long, white, and flowing like silk. Her face was delicate, with high cheekbones and deep violet eyes that stared at him with a mixture of fear and exhaustion. She tried to sit up but winced in pain, clutching her side. Jack immediately noticed the dried blood on her clothes. She was injured. "Hey, don't move," he said, raising his hands to show he wasn't a threat. "I'm here to help." She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her lips trembled. She looked like she had been through hell. Jack quickly pulled out a small medical scanner from his belt and checked her wounds. A deep gash on her ribs, bruises along her arms, and signs of dehydration. She had been here for days, maybe longer. Who was she? How did she end up here? And why was she alone? Danger in the sky. Just as Jack was about to help her up, his ship's warning alarm blared loudly in his earpiece. Warning. Unidentified warship approaching. Distance, 20,000 kilometers and closing fast. Jack's heart jumped. He turned his eyes to the sky and saw a dark shape emerging from the clouds. A massive warship, black and menacing, with sharp angles and glowing red lights, was heading straight for them. His blood ran cold. They were looking for her. She must have sensed his fear because she grabbed his wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. Her violet eyes locked onto his. "Please," she whispered, her voice full of fear. "Don't let them take me." Jack had no idea who she was, why she was running, or what kind of danger he was about to face. But at that moment, he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't leave her behind. Without wasting another second, Jack scooped her up into his arms and ran back to his ship. The engines were still warm, ready to launch. Behind him, the warship descended lower, its weapons charging. The hunt had begun. The chase begins. Jack slammed the cockpit door shut just as the starbound rover's engines roared to life. The ship shook violently, dust and debris scattering in every direction as he pushed the throttle to full power. The alien woman lay weakly in the co-pilot's seat, her breath shallow, her violet eyes filled with fear. She clutched her side where dried silver blood stained her torn clothing. Outside, the enemy warship loomed closer, its red lights flashing like a predator locking onto prey. A robotic voice blared through Jack's speakers. "Unregistered vessel, you are harboring a fugitive of the Dominion Empire. Surrender immediately or be destroyed." Jack didn't hesitate. "Yeah, catch me first." With a sharp pull, he yanked the control stick, sending the starbound rover into a steep vertical climb. The ship's engine screamed as it shot through the thick atmosphere, racing toward the safety of open space. But the warship was fast, too fast. A warning alarm blared in his ears as enemy turrets locked onto them. Boom! A shockwave hit them as a laser beam grazed the hull, shaking the ship like a leaf in a storm. The alien woman let out a weak gasp, gripping the seat as Jack struggled to regain control. "Hold on," Jack growled, twisting the ship into a sharp barrel roll. Another blast missed them by inches, slicing through the clouds like a red-hot knife. The enemy ship was playing with him. They could have destroyed him by now, which meant they wanted her alive. Jack didn't like that. He slammed a button on the control panel, activating countermeasures. Behind them, the starbound rover spat out a cloud of decoy drones, each one emitting a fake heat signature. For a moment, the enemy turrets hesitated. That was all Jack needed. He punched the hyperdrive. The ship lurched forward, gravity pushing them back as they ripped through space, leaving the dead planet and the enemy far behind. For now, inside the cockpit, a stranger, a secret. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Jack exhaled, his heart still hammering against his ribs. He glanced at the alien woman beside him. She was watching him, not with fear, but with curiosity. "You all right?" he asked, reaching for the med kit under the seat. She blinked, her violet eyes studying him like he was a strange creature. Then, with effort, she spoke. "Why did you help me?" Jack frowned. It was a simple question, a fair one. He thought about it. He could have left her. Should have. Probably. Getting involved in alien politics was a death sentence, especially when it involved the Dominion Empire. But that voice, that fear, that look in her eyes when she had begged him not to leave her behind. Jack shook his head. "I don't know. I just did." She stared at him for another moment before slowly nodding. "Thank you." Jack handed her a small vial of water. "Here, you look like you need it." She took it carefully, drinking in slow sips. He noticed her hands were shaking, not just from weakness, but from something else, something deeper. She was running from more than just soldiers. Jack leaned back, watching the distant stars outside. "Who are you?" She hesitated. "Serafina." Jack raised an eyebrow. The name felt important. "And who exactly did I just piss off saving you?" Serafina took a deep breath. And then she dropped a bombshell. "I am the last heir of the Dominion royal family. The Empire wants me dead." Jack's stomach sank. He had just rescued a freaking princess. And now the entire Dominion Empire was going to come after him. Great. Just great. The truth about the chase. Jack ran a hand through his messy hair, letting out a tired laugh. Of course, you're a princess. Why wouldn't you be?" Serafina didn't smile. "They will not stop," she said quietly. They will hunt us across every star until they find me. Jack studied her face. There was no arrogance, no royal pride, just exhaustion, fear, and something else, determination. This wasn't just about her. Why do they want you dead? Jack asked. What did you do? Serafina looked down at her hands. I was born. Jack's eyes narrowed. That's not an answer. She swallowed, as if debating whether to tell him the truth. Finally, she whispered, because I carry the last genetic code of my people. If I die, my species dies with me. Silence. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just some royal power struggle. This was genocide. The Dominion Empire didn't just want her dead. They wanted to erase her entire bloodline. Jack rubbed his face. You've got to be kidding me. Serafina shook her head. No. Jack looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't just some lost princess. She was the key to an entire race's survival. And now he was the only thing standing between her and extinction. He sighed, leaning back in his chair. Well, guess I'm in it now. Serafina tilted her head. You do not have to help me. Jack scoffed. Lady, I just fought off a Dan warship for you. I think I already made my choice. For the first time, a small smile flickered on her lips. But outside, in the cold silence of space, the danger was far from over. Because the hunters were already on their trail. And this time, they wouldn't let her escape. The hidden planet, and a dangerous secret. The starbound rover drifted through the cold void of space, its engines running low and its fuel reserves dangerously close to empty. Jack Carter sat in the cockpit, hands clenched around the control stick, his mind racing. They had escaped. For now. But the Dominion warship was still out there, hunting them. And sooner or later, it would catch up. Behind him, Serafina stirred weakly in the co-pilot's seat. She had fallen into a deep, exhausted sleep. But even in rest, her body trembled, from pain, from fear, from something she hadn't told him yet. Jack's instincts told him there was more to this than just a runaway princess, and he was about to find out what. A hidden sanctuary. The ship's AI crackled to life. Energy levels critical. Fuel at 9%. Recommend emergency landing. Jack cursed under his breath. They needed a place to hide, repair, and figure out their next move. But docking at a space station was too risky. The Dominion would have bounty hunters watching every port. He needed somewhere off the grid. Then his eyes fell on an old star map, flickering on the navigation screen. There, a planet marked only as designation X-29, uninhabited. Jack had heard rumors about it. A forgotten world, long abandoned after some failed colonization attempt. No settlements, no patrols, no people. Exactly what they needed. He punched in the coordinates and sent the ship into a slow descent toward the unknown planet, crash landing on a forgotten world. As they entered the atmosphere, the ship shuddered violently, alarms blaring in the cockpit. The moment they broke through the thick clouds, Jack saw why this planet had been abandoned. It was a graveyard. Below them stretched a landscape covered in wreckage. Hundreds, maybe thousands of old, rusting starships, half buried in the sand. Some were small fighter crafts. Others were massive, towering warships from a battle long forgotten. Jack barely had time to process it before the ship's systems completely failed. "Brace yourself," he shouted. Serafina jolted awake just as the starbound rover came crashing down, smashing through layers of thick fog and landing hard onto the cold surface below. Everything went dark for a few seconds. Then, silence. A planet of ghosts. Jack groaned, his body aching as he unstrapped himself from the seat. "We're alive, I think." Beside him, Serafina winced as she sat up. "Where are we?" Jack looked outside. The planet was shrouded in mist, the wreckage of ancient warships looming like dead giants. The air was thick, heavy, and unnaturally still. "A good hiding place," he said. and maybe a terrible idea. Serafina touched the window, her silver fingers trembling slightly. This place, it feels wrong. Jack couldn't argue with that. There was something off about this planet, something that made the air too quiet, the shadows too deep. But they had no choice. The secret buried in the wreckage. Jack stepped out first, blaster ready, scanning their surroundings. No signs of life. No movement. Yet, somehow, he felt like they were being watched. Serafina followed, walking carefully through the metallic ruins. She stopped near the remains of a strange alien vessel, her fingers brushing over its surface. "This ship," she whispered, "it's from my homeworld." Jack's stomach dropped. Her people had been here before. And that meant Serafina turned sharply, eyes wide. "Jack, this isn't an abandoned planet. It's a battlefield." Jack's pulse quickened. From what war? Serafina took a shaky breath. "The war that destroyed my family." Jack stared at the ruins again. This wasn't just a hiding place. They had just landed in the middle of a graveyard of her people. Something still lives here. Suddenly, the air shifted. A low, metallic hum filled the silence. The sand beneath their feet rumbled. Jack spun around, raising his blaster. "Something's coming." Serafina gasped as dark figures emerged from the mist. Not people, not human. Machines. Old, broken war drones. Still active, still searching for survivors. And now, they had found one. Jack grabbed Serafina's wrist and ran as the first drone's red eyes lit up. And the hunt began again. The hunters catch up. The ground trembled beneath Jack's feet as he sprinted through the ruins, dragging Serafina behind him. Behind them, the war drones, ancient, rusted machines of death, roared to life, their red optics glowing like burning coals. Their metal limbs, once part of a long-forgotten war, whirred and clanked as they activated their weapons. Jack didn't need to look back to know what was coming. "Move, move, move," he barked. Serafina was still weak, her injuries slowing her down, but she pushed forward, breath ragged. The starbound rover was in the distance, a safe haven if they could reach it in time. Then the first plasma shot screamed through the air. Jack barely had time to react. He shoved Serafina down, twisting his body just as a blast of energy scorched past his head, melting the metal wall beside him. "They're firing at us." Serafina gasped, her violet eyes wide with shock. "Yeah, I noticed." Jack gritted his teeth, grabbing her wrist again and pulling her forward. The drones weren't just patrolling. They were hunting. A city of rusted death. The ruins were a maze of twisted steel and broken ships, relics of a battle that had been fought and lost long ago. Jack ducked behind a fallen turret cannon, pulling Serafina with him. "We can't outrun them like this," he muttered. "They're faster, they have weapons, and we—" A plasma bolt slammed into the metal beside his head, sending shards of molten debris flying. Jack cursed. "We need a plan." Serafina was breathing hard, clutching her side. But despite her pain, she was scanning the battlefield with a sharp, calculating look. Then she pointed. "That wreckage. There's a power core still active inside." Jack followed her gaze. She was pointing to a massive, decayed battleship, its hull cracked open, its glowing energy core flickering weakly inside the wreck. Jack squinted. "And that helps us how?" Serafina turned to him, eyes dark. "We overload it." A desperate gamble. Jack had half a second to process what she was suggesting before the drones found their position. Another plasma bolt sizzled through the air, forcing them to roll away just in time. "Okay, fine, let's do this," Jack growled. He dashed toward the old battleship, Serafina right behind him. The moment they slipped inside the wreck, he knew it was a grave mistake. Because they weren't alone. Inside, half buried in dust and rust, was something worse than the drones. A Guardian-class AI mech, still online. Its metallic skull turned toward them, 6 glowing red eyes locking onto Serafina. And then, in a voice like shattered metal, it spoke. Royal genetic signature detected. Serafina froze. Jack's stomach dropped. It wasn't just any war machine. It had been built to protect her family. And now it was deciding if she was still worth protecting. The awakening. Jack slowly raised his hands. Hey, big guy, let's not do anything crazy. VZZZT. The mech's left arm whirred to life, deploying a cannon the size of Jack's torso. I said let's not do anything crazy. Serafina's eyes flashed. She stepped forward, palms raised, breathing steady. I am Princess Serafina of the Dominion bloodline, she said, her voice suddenly firm. Stand down. The mech hesitated. Its eyes flickered. Processing. Jack held his breath. Then the mech spoke again. Bloodline. Confirmed. The cannon lowered. The mech's posture relaxed. Jack blinked. Wait, that worked. Serafina staggered, sweat beading on her forehead. Not for long. It's still deciding. Outside, the drones were closing in, their metallic footsteps echoing through the ruins. Jack ran to the power core panel, ripping open the controls. How much time do we have? Serafina swayed but stayed standing. Minutes. Maybe less. Jack muttered a curse. Then let's blow this thing and get the hell out of here. The betrayal. Jack worked fast, rewiring the unstable power core, while Serafina kept the mech occupied. Just as he finished, the mech's red eyes flared. Warning, rogue Dominion forces detected. Activating countermeasures. Jack froze. Serafina went pale. The mech wasn't just a guardian. It was a traitor detector. And in its eyes, Serafina wasn't a princess anymore. She was a fugitive. The cannon raced again, executing termination protocol. Jack acted instantly. He grabbed Serafina and yanked her away just as the mech's cannon exploded with energy, blowing a hole straight through the wreck. Run, Jack bellowed. Serafina didn't need to be told twice. They sprinted out of the battleship, the mechs and drones chasing close behind. Jack smashed a button on his wristpad, activating the overloaded power core. The ruins shook violently as the core reached critical mass. Jack and Serafina barely made it to cover before. The explosion erupted, consuming the mech, the drones, and the entire wreck in a fiery blast. Jack hit the ground hard, ears ringing. Serafina was next to him, coughing but alive. They had barely survived, but there was no time to celebrate. Because in the distance, beyond the smoke and wreckage, the Dominion warship was descending. They had been found. The final betrayal. The ground still shook from the explosion. Jack pulled Serafina up, his ears ringing from the blast. The war drones were gone, their metallic bodies now smoking wreckage, but there was no time to breathe. Because high above them, the Dominion warship was descending. Jack's mind raced. We need to move. Now. Serafina swayed on her feet, exhaustion clear in her violet eyes. Her silver skin was slick with sweat, her body weakened from using her strange abilities back in the wreckage. Jack grabbed her wrist, forcing her forward. I didn't just survive an army of killer drones to get caught now. Let's go. Their ship, the starbound rover, was still too far away. They'd never make it in time. Then, through the smoke, a figure emerged. A man, tall, wearing an old military coat, with a blaster rifle slung over his shoulder. Jack instantly aimed his pistol. Not the time, pal. The man raised his hands. Easy, Carter. I'm not here to kill you. Jack's eyes narrowed. He knew that voice. No damn way. The man grinned. Been a long time, hasn't it? Jack lowered his pistol, his mind spinning. This wasn't just any man. It was Oren Voss, an old war veteran, a smuggler, and once Jack's closest friend. An old friend or a new enemy. Oren took a slow step forward, glancing at Serafina. You're carrying some valuable cargo there, Carter. Jack tensed. She's not cargo. Orin smirked. The Dominion doesn't think so. You know they've got a bounty on her, right? Jack already did. He just didn't want to think about how big it was. Serafina looked between them. Who is he? Jack sighed. Orin Voss. Ex-soldier. Now well, whatever gets him paid. Orin laughed. Still bitter, huh? Jack didn't answer. Orin's ship, a rusted but sturdy freighter, was parked a few meters away. The ramp was down, the engines humming softly. A way out. You're being hunted, Carter, Orin continued. I've got a ship, a safe port, and I can get you both out of here. Jack hesitated. The warship was still descending, searching the wreckage. They were out of time. He looked at Serafina. She was watching Orin, eyes narrowed, studying him. Can we trust him? She asked. Jack didn't know the answer. But right now, they had no other choice. He nodded. Let's go. The trap. The moment Jack and Serafina stepped onto Orin's ship, something felt wrong. Too quiet. Too easy. The ship lifted off, leaving the wreckage behind. Jack exhaled, tension easing slightly. Maybe he was just paranoid. Then, a metallic voice echoed through the speakers. Connection established with Dominion warship. Target acquired. Jack's blood went cold. He spun toward Orin, but it was too late. Orin's blaster was already aimed at his chest. Jack felt his stomach drop. You son of a... BZZT. Electricity ripped through Jack's body as Orin fired a stun shot, sending him crashing to the floor. Serafina screamed as Dominion soldiers rushed in from the cargo hold, their armored boots stomping onto the deck. Jack tried to move, but his body wouldn't respond. His muscles spasmed, his vision blurred. He could only watch as Serafina was dragged away, fighting against her captors, her violet eyes locked onto him. And then, darkness. Captured. Jack woke up in a cold, metallic cell. His head pounded, his body still weak from the stun blast. Chains bound his wrists. His weapons were gone. The ship's humming engines told him they were still moving, probably toward a Dominion-controlled sector. He gritted his teeth. Orin had sold them out. Jack had been betrayed before, but this stung. A door hissed open. Orin walked in, arms crossed. You always were too trusting, Carter. Jack glared. Yeah. And you always were a bastard. Orin chuckled. Nothing personal. The Dominion's offering a fortune for her. Jack leaned forward. And what do they want with me? Orin shrugged. They didn't say. But if I were you, I'd worry about what's coming next. Jack's fists clenched. Where is she? Orin smirked. With the Dominion now. Jack felt a burning rage rise in his chest. They had taken her. And now he was going to get her back. No matter what it took. The ultimate sacrifice. The cell was cold. Jack sat on the metal bench, wrists bound in energy cuffs, his body aching from Orin's betrayal. His mind, however, wasn't on himself. It was on her. Serafina. She was gone, taken by the Dominion, and he had no idea what they would do to her. Jack had spent his whole life avoiding causes, steering clear of wars, empires, and royal politics. But this wasn't about empires anymore. They had taken her, and Jack Carter wasn't going to let that slide. The escape plan. The guards thought he was broken, thought the cuffs had tamed him. They were wrong. Jack had spent years in the underworld of space, running jobs for criminals, learning every trick in the book. And rule number 1, never stay captured for long. When the guards came to feed him, Jack was ready. The first one barely had time to react before Jack lunged, slamming his elbow into the soldier's throat. The second one reached for his blaster, but Jack spun and kicked it out of his hand. He caught the weapon midair and fired. VZZ. The energy cuffs short-circuited, unlocking with a sharp hiss. Jack cracked his knuckles. Well, That was easy. Alarms blared, red lights flashing. The Dominion knew he was loose, but Jack didn't care. He was coming for her. The rescue mission. Jack fought his way through the corridors of the Dominion warship. His body moved on instinct, ducking plasma shots, returning fire, moving fast. The soldiers were better armed, but Jack was angrier, and that made him deadlier. Every step brought him closer to Serafina. Then he saw it, a high-security lab at the center of the ship, and inside. Serafina. She was strapped to a metallic containment pod, her arms locked down, her body glowing faintly with silver energy. Jack's stomach twisted. They were draining her. A tall Dominion scientist turned, noticing him. Impossible. How did you escape? Jack shot him in the leg. The scientist collapsed, screaming. Jack pressed the barrel to his forehead. How do I get her out? The scientist trembled. You can't. If you disconnect her, she'll die. Jack's grip tightened. Try again. The scientist gulped, pressing a trembling hand to the console. The restraints unlocked. Serafina collapsed forward, but Jack caught her before she hit the ground. Her violet eyes fluttered open. Jack, she whispered weakly. I've got you. But as he turned to leave, the containment pod behind her began to hum. The scientist let out a low, bitter laugh. You fool. It's too late. Jack frowned. What the hell are you talking about? The scientist coughed, blood dripping from his lips. She's bonded to the ship now. If she leaves, the energy inside her will tear her apart. Jack felt ice settle in his stomach. He turned to Serafina. She knew. Her face was pale, her hands shaking, but she nodded. Jack, I can't leave. Jack clenched his jaw. The hell you can't. Serafina gave him a sad smile. I'm linked to the power core. If I leave now, the energy inside me will. Jack grabbed her shoulders. We'll find another way. Serafina shook her head. There is no other way. Jack's fists trembled. For the first time in years, he felt helpless. The choice. Jack looked at the control panel. He could override the containment sequence. But doing that would only work if someone else took her place. Jack exhaled slowly. There was only one option left. Serafina saw the look in his eyes and froze. No. Jack gave her a small smirk. I never was good at listening. He slammed his hand on the override switch. Pain ripped through him as all of Serafina's energy transferred into his body. His veins lit up, burning like fire, his muscles locking up as alien energy surged through him. Serafina fell forward, her glow fading, her body becoming human weak. Jack, on the other hand, he was changing. A new beginning. When Jack opened his eyes, he wasn't the same. His body felt lighter, stronger. The energy that once made Serafina unique now flowed through him. Serafina sat up slowly, staring at him in shock. Jack, what did you do? Jack exhaled, looking at his hands. They were glowing. I made a choice. Then the ship rumbled. More Dominion forces were coming. Jack turned to Serafina, his voice calm. Steady. Let's go. And for the first time, she wasn't the one protecting him. Now he was protecting her. The birth of a new future. The warship shook violently, alarms blaring, red emergency lights flashing across the metal corridors. The Dominion forces were scrambling. Something was wrong. Something had changed. Jack Carter stood in the center of the chaos, his body glowing with raw, uncontained energy. His veins pulsed with the same silver light that once belonged to Serafina, his very existence now fused with something far beyond human. Serafina sat weakly against the control panel, watching in stunned silence. Jack was no longer just a man. He had become something new. The first test of power. The Dominion soldiers stormed into the lab, rifles raised. Jack barely looked at them before lifting a hand. Boom. A wave of pure energy erupted from his palm, crushing the air around them. The soldiers were flung back, crashing into the walls like ragdolls. Jack blinked. What was that? The power wasn't just inside him. It obeyed him. Serafina's voice was soft, amazed, and terrified all at once. Jack, you're a conduit now. Jack clenched his fists. His body felt unstoppable, yet somehow, completely his own. For the first time, he understood. Serafina's people weren't just advanced. They were designed for something greater. And now, so was he. The escape begins. Jack turned to Serafina, his glowing gaze locking onto hers. Can you walk? She nodded weakly. Just don't get yourself killed. Jack grinned. No promises. He grabbed her hand and took off running. The ship was coming apart. Systems overloading, energy surges flickering across the walls. Jack could feel it all, as if he was linked to the very core of the warship. He didn't just sense the ship's structure. He could control it. As Dominion soldiers appeared in front of them, Jack didn't even need to fire a weapon. Instead, he reached out with his mind. And the doors slammed shut behind them, trapping their pursuers inside. Serafina stared at him. You shouldn't be able to do that. Jack smirked. Guess I'm breaking the rules today. They reached the hangar bay, where rows of Dominion fighters were parked, sleek and deadly. Jack didn't hesitate. He thrust his hands forward. The energy within him surged. One of the fighters roared to life, its engines powering up without anyone inside. Jack wasn't flying the ship. He was commanding it. Serafina's breath hitched. Jack, you're evolving. Jack clenched his fists. Then let's evolve the hell out of here. They boarded the ship just as Dominion reinforcements arrived. Jack reached out one last time, and the hangar doors ripped open, launching them into space. The final stand. Outside, the Dominion warship loomed above them, weapons locking on. Jack could feel its power grid, its shields, its weapons, all of it flowing through his mind like a network. The warship fired. Jack raised his hands. The blast never reached them. Instead, the energy from the ship's weapons froze mid-space, then reversed, slamming back into the warship itself. The entire vessel shook violently, explosions erupting across its hull. Jack wasn't just escaping. He was rewriting the rules of war. Serafina gasped. Jack, stop. You'll kill yourself. Jack exhaled sharply. His body was burning, the energy coursing through him like a star ready to explode. But he knew one thing. If he didn't finish this, they would never stop hunting them. Jack focused, pulling every ounce of power he had left. The warship buckled under the force of its own weapons. Then, it imploded. A silent, devastating burst of light filled the void of space. And then, there was nothing. A new future. Jack collapsed back into the co-pilot's seat, gasping for breath. His glow faded, the power within him finally calming. Serafina was watching him, her expression unreadable. That was impossible. Jack wiped the sweat from his brow. Yeah, getting used to that. She hesitated, then placed a hand over his. Jack, what are you now? Jack looked down at his hands. Once just human. Now, something else. He thought for a moment. Then he smiled. I guess I'm just me. Serafina exhaled a soft laugh. Then where do we go now? Jack looked out at the stars. The universe stretched endless before them. The Dominion was crippled. The bounty was worthless now. For the first time in his life, Jack wasn't running anymore. He was free. Jack smirked. Anywhere we want. The ship shot into the void, two souls escaping into a future unknown. And for the first time in both their lives, they weren't alone anymore.